Okay. So welcome everybody. Let's get started. So welcome very much to the physics research presentation night. So organized by the physics club, who's going to introduce some things in just a little bit. So this is just our attempt to make sure all of the students know the awesome research that we're doing here in the Department of Physics. We're really trying to encourage you guys to get involved with a research group if you're not. I will remind you, as I was saying before, that there's this Balix physics research internships for first-year students who are going into their second year. So anyone who's not an outstanding scholars can and should apply for that. We're going to give one out almost no matter what. You do have to find a research advisor ahead of time. The deadline was next Friday. I can give you a little more time now if you need it, because I picked the deadline a while ago. But this is your chance to hear what we're doing. You got to go talk to advisors, see if they'd be willing to take you on next year. And then you go for that. And it'll pay you some amount of money, decent amount of money to support and pay for your research in the fall. So that will be great. We are recording all of this, thanks to Dr. Rau. So the recording is from these cameras up above. So they're going to be seeing just the front of the room. So none of you are on camera, but we will be posting this to YouTube afterwards. So people who cannot attend, you can feel free to tell them to share with them. So
including the slides, will the slides be available?
The slides will be clearly visible on the screen.
Okay.
This shows everything. So, but that means for the research presenters, when you're talking, maybe you don't want to stand right in front of it, because for people on YouTube, they will be able to see this, but they'll be able to see you and the slides. So there's plenty of food. Please make sure you guys are getting food. Maybe we'll take a little break at some point after a couple people have talked, so people can get up and don't be worried about making noise. So our president of the physics club has some in-presentation entertainment arranged for us, and she's also going to be our master of ceremonies and master timekeeper, I should say. We have the official timekeeping. Most of you have not been to a conference yet, but at most of the conferences we go to, standard CAP or APS format is you have 15 minutes to present. Usually it's 12 minutes of talking, 3 minutes for questions. So the way it always works at a conference is the light turns green when you're on, it turns yellow at the warning light. So in this case, it's going to come on after 3 minutes, meaning you have 2 minutes left. And when it turns red, then Sareen's going to get a hook and pull you up on the stage. All right. So, but the point is, we do this so everyone in the room can see when somebody's going over time. It's a peer pressure thing. It's not so much for the speaker. It's just everyone can know. It's okay, you're done. So Sareen will be our timekeeper, and she'll be sitting up front, and she has a little game for us here.
Okay, so you guys can clearly see in front of you, we gave you bingo sheets. The professors are so kind to give us each a few words that they're going to be using during their presentation. So as you listen to a professor talk about their research, one, pay attention to what they're saying, because there's some key words that will be on your sheet. If you get 5 in a row, diagonal, column, rows, first, please just raise your hand. I'll write down your name, and then you may be able to win a prize, being this cool orb light and dark chocolate bar. So the kind of point of this, even if you keep it after, when you look, you'll remember these words, and then if you, let's say, see Meerna, you'll be like, oh, Dr. Licciardi does Meerna research, then you'll remember that. It's kind of also a way to remember what each prof talked about and why it's important, what we did today. Okay, so I hope you have fun. Just a little interactive way to make this fun. Yes, that is all I have to say.
So without further ado, then let us begin our 20th. So let us begin our 2025 Physics Department research presentations. We are joined by one professor remotely, Professor TJ Hammond, who is on sabbatical in Ottawa. He's joining us live via Teams, so he's going to do his presentation here. So thank you very much, TJ. Take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Rehse. I'm currently actually in Vancouver, but I'm going back to Ottawa in May, June. Thank you much. So here, if you can see my screen, I'll put it on presentation view. So I'm in the attosecond condensed matter experiments lab, and you might ask, what do any of those words mean? So first, I'll talk about who we are. So if I can, so this is me. This is with my students from last summer. So Nathan is my PhD student. A lot of you in 1500 are taking a class with Dr. Rau, and Nathan is the TA for that class.
TJ, so you gotta switch the slide in the edit view.
Yeah.
You're not in presentation view, so switch it in the edit view. Otherwise, we're still on the first slide.
Oh, how about now then?
You're good.
Okay. Okay, but you can't. Can you see my pointer or not?
No.
No. Okay. All right. So this is okay. I'll just gesture then, or I won't gesture then. So this is my group. So in the middle you have Nathan on the left there. Me, I'm in the brown sweater, and then so Nathan is a PhD student. He's been TA for 1500, so a lot of you know him. Otherwise, there are the undergrad students. So we have Rachel and Jordan, and they're now second-year students. And then we have Michael, who's graduated, and Pratik also graduated. And then recently, they gave talks at the UWill Discover conference. So they talked about the research that they've been doing since last summer. So Meerna gave a talk on developing AFM technologies, which is a microscope for scanning with nanometer resolution. Jordan built a Tesla coil, and we also built Anthony built a pendulum that actually can be inverted. So instead of just falling like a normal pendulum, it can actually be upside down. So these are some of the projects that people have been working on. So you can see this slide, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what do we do in the attosecond condensed matter experiments group? So what is an attosecond? An attosecond, well, you might not know what an attosecond is, but you know what a nanosecond is. So a microprocessor, so like on your phone or your computer, works at the nanosecond timescale. So that's 10 to the minus 9 seconds. Molecules are much smaller than processors, so they can tumble around, and those rotate at about 10 to the minus 12 seconds. So that's a picosecond. So that's three orders of magnitude faster. And then 3 orders of magnitude faster than that is a vibration of a molecule, and that's a femtosecond time scale. So that's 10 to the minus 15, so a millionth of a billionth of a second. And typically that's about as fast as lasers can get. That's about as short of a pulse that you can possibly generate from a laser. But what I want to study is stuff that's even faster than that, and so that's an attosecond. And so if you actually think about what the Earth orbiting around the sun, it takes a year, right? So a year is like 10 million seconds kind of thing. Well, if instead you shrunk down the Earth down to the size of a proton, and you had the Earth orbit around like in a classical Bohr atom, if the Earth were the size of an electron, this would take 150 attoseconds, so 10 to the minus 18 seconds. So that's the time scale that I'm dealing with, is these really, really, really fast time scales, and they're really, really, really small so that they can be this fast, right? Electrons orbiting around protons is very, very fast. So what we try and do is we look at this in condensed matter, and Dr. Rau will talk more about what condensed matter is, but it's basically like solid stuff. So I'm trying to understand how electrons move through like crystals and metals and things like that. So that's basically what I do. How do I do this stuff? Well, I study what's called nonlinear and quantum optics. So in this top, you have what I call as a coherent rainbow. So what we do is we take a really intense laser, we manipulate it with other colors of light, and we make new colors of light. And those new colors make a rainbow, as you can see there in that picture. What we can do with that is we can amplify really, really weak signals. So the nice thing about that is if we had a really weak signal that we want to investigate, well, we can amplify that by many, many, many orders of magnitude, and then we have a strong signal that we can detect with, traditional detectors. The other cool thing about this is we can manipulate fields. So by having these really strong fields passing through the materials, it changes what those fields do and what they look like and how they evolve and things like that. Another thing that we do is what we're developing is remote detection and environmental sensing, and we do that with taking a really strong beam and we pass that through air or water or something like that. And so there in the middle, I don't know if you'll be able to see it with the screen, but we do laser controlled lightning. So we take a really intense laser beam and we interact that with like an arc that we can create, and that allows us to manipulate the environment so we can detect things remotely. So this work is relevant to very related, very recent Nobel Prizes. So Nobel Prize in 2018 was the development of high-powered lasers. So I work with a high-power laser. And the Nobel Prize in 2023 was for attosecond science, and I work with attoseconds. So I can see that I'm starting to already run out of time. But what we do is we basically use this to develop very sensitive spectroscopic techniques. So Nathan's project is to look at Raman spectroscopy. So we manipulate the vibration of molecules and then we probe that with another field. And that allows us to really amplify this signal that we're looking at. So if you're a first or second year student, I wouldn't have you working with this high power laser beam that can really blow up stuff because I think that's a little too dangerous. But what you can do is you can work on a whole bunch of these really cool side projects that we allow that will help us develop these tools. So as I said, we have like light interacting with lightning, with these lasers. And so one thing that we want to do is generate lightning in the lab. So Jordan's project was to generate a Tesla coil, and that's what we have there on the left. We want to understand how to build better, like, how to build better electronics and things like that. And so we have to kind of start somewhere. So we had a motor generating this pendulum. So that was Anthony's project. We're running simulations on understanding how really intense fields manipulate matter with electrons and things like that. So that was Rachel was doing simulations on these strong field physics. And then on the right, we have Meerna using an AFM to study these laser ablation things. So we had really, really strong lasers hitting crystals, and then they were blowing up the crystals. And we wanted to see what kind of laser pattern we were doing with this for like laser machining and micro machining and things like that. And so that's what Meerna's project is. So these are the kind of different projects that people can work on as an undergrad, first year, second year, third year students. And so these are kind of neat things that you'd be able to investigate. So if you'd like to reach out to me, feel free to email me at thammond@uwindsor.ca. My lab is, or my office is right there, which you probably know, but my lab is in the basement right next to Phys Club. So if you want to talk to anybody who's in my group right now, feel free to go down to the lab and ask or reach out to me. And I'll be in town at the end of April, early May, to be able to meet with you one-on-one if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. That was fantastic. All right, we're going to switch over now to our next speaker, Professor Rau.
This one, we just switch everything over.
Give us 1 second. So hopefully some people filled up the bingo cards. How many did you catch there, Sareen? Just out of curiosity.
Me,
I saw some hand movements.
I got 2.
Okay.
These talks.
So there you go. There may or may not have been 2 in there. There you go. That's exactly. You want to use those? I don't think. This. I got it. Go the middle. Can you hear us? No, because the person on the video looks really dark. So it's for YouTube, that's bad. It's better with the. I'm pretty sure. Can you hear us? No, they can make their food. Okay. Find out.
I can't see the chat, so that's what I'm
Yeah. Yes, okay, he's good to go. Yep.
When does it go yellow?
Like
3 minutes, 2
All
minutes.
right. So I'm Jeff Rau. So my research is in condensed matter theory. And as Dr. Hammond told you, this is essentially anything that is a whole lot of particles all at once, like a solid or a liquid, and typically interacting with each other somewhat strongly. My work is mostly in magnetism. So materials where the atoms in that crystal, for example, have magnetic moments like little bar magnets, and these things interact with each other. And I'm mostly interested in magnets that are frustrated. And so frustration here essentially means that pairs of these things, pairs of these things can find some mutually beneficial way to arrange themselves. When you put them all together, they can't, right? So 2 of them can say, let's say they want to go opposite to each other, that's fine. You put a third one there that wants to go opposite to both of them, it can't, okay? So it's frustrated, it doesn't know what to do. And usually when that happens, it leads to interesting physics, okay? What I do sort of hits on a lot of different things at the same time. So, there are lots of different kinds of magnets and different phenomena you can see in magnetic systems. Really, I'm not interested in magnets because, they're fun, they are fun, right? But because they're sort of a really clean and understandable and practical way to explore what can happen when you bring lots and lots of atoms, lots of particles together. And in particular, what can happen when you start including effects that, for example, go beyond classical physics. So when you take many of these things together, the properties that come out of these collections of particles are often what's called emergent, in that they're not easily predictable, or in some cases not predictable at all, from the sort of underlying, or not, maybe not predictable, not expected from the underlying sort of, say, pairwise interactions between these particles. Okay, so some recent directions that we've been working on in my group. So things related to frustrated magnets, maybe the simplest form of frustration is something called order by disorder, where essentially fluctuations, either due to temperature or quantum mechanics, sort of resolve a kind of minimal amount of frustration and lead to some sort of definite state. Ways to model this using perturbative expansions for these magnetic systems. Sort of canonical examples of sort of highly frustrated systems that don't order at all. They don't end up like a ferromagnet that can stick to your fridge. They enter into some sort of random disordered state as you lower the temperature. And also new kinds of magnets. This is something I just got into in the last year and a half or so. Ultramagnetism, which is kind of a hybrid between ferromagnetism and antiferromagnetism that they think has applications in spintronics, which is an effort to try to replace electronics with essentially currents based on spins on sort of magnetic properties, which they expect to have less dissipation. These are just some other things students in my group have done. So work on cadav magnets. This is a sort of prototypical highly frustrated magnet doing quantum and classical simulations of the effects of perturbations like electric and magnetic fields on these things. Non-Hermitian physics, that can be realized in sort of spin waves or low energy excitations of these magnetic systems. Generally, the work I do is some sort of mix between pen and paper analytical work and computational work. So I think pretty much every project I've done in the last 5 to 10 years is a little bit of both. And so if you were to do research with me, you'd be sort of doing a little bit of both, right? So you'd be writing some code, solving some equations, writing more code to solve those equations, go back and forth. Also, there's a lot of experimental work in frustrated magnetism. All over the world, people working on these things, studying them, measuring these properties. And so there's lots of opportunities to collaborate with these experimental groups. And I've got open collaborations with about a half dozen of these groups currently on a half dozen materials in a whole bunch of different contexts. So there's often opportunities to sort of try to confront these ideas, these theories with real data. Okay. There's more other things that are less frustrated magnetism that are also interesting that I've been working on, but I'll just leave those there. If you want to see more about what my group does, I have a website, list of publications. You can take a look at some of those, see if anything strikes your interest. That's basically what I do.
All right, who's next? Okay, next, should we go bounce back and forth between theory and experiment? Because I believe we can do that for the whole night. Is that okay with anybody?
Maybe he should say his words. Like he promised on the bingo card.
Oh, I don't know that we even know the words that if we say that. No, I know them, I'm sure. I said at least 3 of them.
No, I got 3 words already.
So maybe next we'll just have Dr. Xiao come up. We have enough people in the department to alternate back and forth between experimental physicists and theoretical physicists. So you're going to see a good range of both of them tonight. So we still have, after Dr. Xiao, we have 2 more experimentalists and 2 more theorists. And so it's perfect.
Couple of them good enough class. No one's going to win.
Hello. Oh, so thank you. Hello, I'm Dan Xiao. I have my MRI lab. So most of you probably have been to my lab before. It's a little bit different from the MRI you see in the hospital. It's not huge, but we have all the bells and whistles of a full MRI, and we have our unique advantages compared to those in the hospital. So generally, if you work in an MRI lab, even if you're at the level of a PhD student in the medical world, most likely you'll be going into the lab, which is this big instrument, and you sit there and you execute those pre-existing experiments. You choose from a list and then you change some parameters, you run it. And you are not even likely to be the person who clicked the button. It will be a technician who's sitting next to you who's clicking on the button, and then you just watch. That's the amount of MRI hands-on experience most of the students will get. But for us, we don't have that huge instrument, but we have a lot of flexibility. They charge themselves $500 per hour. So think about if you have access to this all the time, how much money you gain from there. So we not only could run all the experiments as we like, we could also create our new experiments. So we develop new methods, we program it. It's like coding. You have the certain coding environment. So you first design an experiment and then you make it happen. Of course, things won't happen in the experimental world. So you debug, that's where you get these skills of the real world problem solving skills. So you get the raw data, you do the image reconstruction, you do the data processing, you can do whatever you want. So basically we have an open toy to play with. And we have all the advantage of, flexible contrast, high resolution. So we have currently a project with the biological group. They study Alzheimer's. So we help them image the mouse brain to see how the hippocampus shrinks with the development of the disease. So in addition to playing with this instrument as much as we want, we can take it apart. We can put more component into this, and we can also make our own instrument. So we do hardware development. This is not just for fun. A lot of times you have other requirements, you have other goals. You always should have a goal in mind of what you are trying to study. And from there, you design a pulse sequence, but that's probably not enough. And then you develop new hardware that goes with your bigger picture. So our work was recently featured by Growers magazine, the most recent issue. And this is actually on the cover of the Growers magazine. They talk about how we develop these portable MRIs so that we can study vegetable, fruits, and plants in situ. So the idea is we're going to bring the instrument to the field, to the greenhouse, and monitor the plant while they are growing. So there are a lot of monitors, but none of them will be a direct measurement. People don't really know the mechanisms of how plants interact with the environment, with the soil, how their physiology changes. But we could do a lot of direct measurement, including the flow, including the metabolism, including the fertilizer transportation. So this is made by our students, mostly undergraduate students. So Michael did the magnet, and Mila did the art coil. Some is designing the gradient coil to make it better optimized. And Ashlyn is trying to get the spectrometer affordable. So generally, if you buy a commercial spectrometer, that's about 50,000. And she's going to see if it will work with red papaya, which is about $1,000. So we could mass produce this instrument. And this is another project we have about chicken and eggs. So the idea really is about 6 billion of male chicks would be killed once they are born. They won when they are hatched. So these are very inhumane. In addition to the cost of economy, this is very inhumane practice because a lot of them would just be thrown into grinders alive. I really don't want that. So yeah, as an animal lover, environmentalist. So I figured, oh, something's wrong with that. So I figured if something could be done so that we can detect this. If something could be done so that we can detect the gender of the chicks, so that we can kill them on day 7 of the hatching, then we can save those lives. Let's stop there.
No bingo. I already got a bingo.
What? I just have a question. Was chicken on the bingo card?
Eggs were on the bingo.
Oh, but not chicks.
So,
I thought like meat grinder was not on the bingo card. That's like very springy stuff. So, all right. That's all right. That's good. Let's see. I'm gonna suggest we have one more. Dr. Drake, would you like to go? Let's have one more person, and let's take a little break so we can fill up on some more food after that. Okay. So let's listen to one more talk and then a chance to read more stuff.
Okay. About like, yeah, when it's like the doctor, I need to. You had it.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we enlarge? I guess I should
Just confirm that you got the backup. So that detector, I got these. I got three of, I was missing one, but he said he thought already. I don't. Like, I really, here, I didn't secure it. I think so.
Right, so everybody, next I'll introduce, we have here someone that a lot of you might not have seen unless you're working in this group. So this is University Professor Emeritus Gordon Drake. It would take me 5 minutes to explain what all of those words in the title actually mean. So let's not do that. But what it basically means is that Gordon has retired, but he's still an extremely well-funded and extremely well-active researcher. So even though you would not have seen him in your classes, but he has a very active research group and would love to tell you about it and hope that you are willing to join him. But just because if you don't see him teaching, don't let that bother you, because that's the dream of all of us, to not be teaching and doing research all the time.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for the introduction. In fact, that saves me about half a minute from my time. So start up, and it's great to see so many people here. Such a good attendance to hear these research presentations. And there are a great many interesting things going on in the department. As Dr. Rehse said, I'm Gordon Drake, and I've been here since 1969. My research grant has just recently been increased, so I have secure funding for the next 5 years. And my work is based on theoretical atomic and optical physics. Here are the people who are currently in my group. You may not be able to read it. Aaron Bondi, who is still here, but recently got his PhD. Eva Schulhoff graduated 2 or 3 years ago. But here is 6 undergraduates, so all members currently of my group. And we sit in a room just, what is it, 293, I think is the number. 291, just almost next door to here, where we have our 6 workstations. So we have lots of computing, in-house computing power. And as Dr. Rau said, our work is a combination of paper and pencil type mathematical analysis and computer implementation. So what do we do? Well, first of all, just before we go on, Evan Petrimo will be giving a talk a week from today, giving a seminar on his 4th year thesis, which is connected with a research project at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor to develop a high precision magnetometer. And his work is involved with calculating, taking into account relativistic corrections, some nonlinear corrections that have to be taken into account to make a high precision magnetometer, which is of course the same physics as as magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. So it's the same basic physics as what Dr. Xiao was just talking about. So can we go on to the next slide? How do we do that?
You gotta go click it
Okay.
or scroll or.
Roll.
That's the PDF. There you go.
There, okay, yeah, so this is my bubble diagram, which summarizes everything that we do, starting with high precision atomic theory in the center. And here are some of the payoffs around the edge, tests of the standard model. As many of us know, there are many defects with the standard model, and we're constantly looking for new physics beyond the standard model. And our work is part of it. The motivation is to try to look for evidence of new physics beyond the standard model. And we do this by taking into account relativistic effects and quantum electrodynamics. Down here at the bottom, proton size puzzle and fundamental concepts we've just gone off the screen. So starting with high precision atomic theory, you can study radiative transitions, things like 2-photon decay. These high-lying Rydberg states, this is a current topic of great interest. We have a unique capability in the world to perform theory for these high-lying Rydberg states of helium. So you have one electron in the ground state and the other high-lying. So a Rydberg state the name refers to high-lying states going up as high as 25 or 30. And this work is done in close collaboration with an experimental group at ETH in Switzerland. We also work in close collaboration with the the high energy particle accelerator in Darmstadt, Germany. And in fact, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be visiting Darmstadt to as part of the evaluation of their programs. So they're you can also going off also to study isotope shifts, and in that way look for evidence of an electron-neutron interaction. So we all know that electrons and protons attract one another, but there may be new particles beyond the standard model that mediate an electron-neutron interaction. And you can study this by looking at sequences of isotopes. And so that's what is involved here. These high-end Rydberg states allow us to do quantum defect fits, which allow us to extrapolate all the way up to the series limit, and asymptotic expansion methods. So these are all methods of atomic physics. Here's helium-like ions. Beta decay, this was out of time. Okay, so let me just conclude then by saying that I didn't include, I have some handouts of my bubble diagram for anyone who would like to pick one of these up. I only have 12. We have way more people than 12.
We can make more.
So yeah, I can make more. But if you're interested on the theory side, pick one of these up. And I also have a verbal description, a written description of our research programs. I didn't include my email address, which is just gdrake at UWindsor.ca. And our website is just SharkNet. It's actually drake.sharknet. Sharknet.ca. So you can get more information from these places. So I'll stop there.
Okay, everybody, so as promised, let's just take a little break right now because you have to go get some more food because the department loves buying food for you guys. The only thing I don't like is when we leave at the end of the night and you have not eaten the food. So please don't be shy. Get up, get some more. We have some wonderful cookies there and we'll resume in like 5 minutes, just as quick as you can. Come back and sit down.
Not a bingo.
And bingo.
I did. I did.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody's all right? All right, we can go ahead and get started. I just wanted to, in case you weren't completely up to speed on what the agenda is, that there's 1, 2, 3 more professors to talk. After that, Sareen has lined up a wonderful slate of current undergraduate researchers who are each going to come up and give kind of, I don't think they're going to talk so much about what the research they're doing is, but they really want to convey to you what they're getting out of research, why you should think about doing it. So you're hearing what it is that you could do, but I think a better question is, why should you even want to? It's like, oh, you're so busy, you're busy with your classes, you got a lot on your plate. How can you possibly spend more time doing it? And you're going to hear from these researchers how much it actually is enriching the physics educational experience for them. So that'll be right after the professors are done talking. So that is coming up. Thanks to Sareen for arranging that. So I'll turn the floor over to Professor Licciardi.
Hi, thanks. Okay, so I'll talk about our group. It's my topic is called astroparticle physics, but I mean, we really work in experimental particle physics, and also big experiments. So in our group, we contribute to larger collaborations, like the two figures there. So I wanted to motivate what, I wanted to introduce what motivates our work. So it really is motivated by these fundamental questions about the universe, like how we got created. So I'll probably single out this how we got created, questions through this talk. And the first breakthrough we had in history was when Newton's laid his laws of dynamics and gravitation and made the connection between, let's say, the same laws in the Earth, right? It's the same laws in the outer space, right? And then maybe it took a little while, but about 200 years later, we developed these chambers where you can actually see these tiny particles passing through and disturbing like gas, stability, and we learned that we're really being bombarded by fundamental particles from the space, right? And we measure, and it kind of looks like these, and we call that cosmic rays. And then studying cosmic rays, we learned there are particles, elementary particles that go beyond particles you find in atoms, right? We learned everything's made of atoms, but then there are more particles beyond the atoms, right? In the same chambers, we learn more about the behavior atoms, right? They're not necessarily, at rest or, stable, that they keep decaying and producing, these different particles. One of them we learned was kind of a surprise because, all these new information required more physics than Newton's law. So we developed some physics that's specific for the tiny things and very, very fast. So this is called quantum field. And in that development, it was around the early 20th century, right? We discovered the antiparticles. So things that looks like particle, but they have opposite electromagnetic charge. And then, so here's a picture of the first observation of a particle that looks like an electron, but it's an anti-electron. It's called positron. And then with that, we learned basically learn a way of how we can produce matter, right? We learned that, particles and antiparticles, electrons and anti-electrons, they can sort of annihilate and transform into like pure energy, like the form of light. But then if you reverse the process, right, you can come with light and create antimatter and matter. Right? So that looks like a way on how it got created, right? The only problem with these is that, if that was the only thing happening, we should be able to find the same amount of matter and antimatter, right? And when you look around, you only see matter, right? You only see atoms, not anti-atoms, right? But then kind of studying these, we also learned a tiny fraction of times, right? Which I know this is complicated like a matrix, but if you think of this matrix being like an identity matrix, anything that goes off the diagonal is like a more projection of matter over antimatter, right? But no, it's very, very tiny, right? So it almost runs here. And so this is not enough, right? So you have to look for ways in which this breaks even more, right? And then looking at the atoms, and in particular measuring these beta decays where essentially it's a nucleus that speed an electron, right? We calculated these rates, and then we expected that the electrons to come out with this specific speed, and it didn't, right? So when we measure the speed, it's actually continuous. We learned that the atoms actually produce something that does not belong to an atom, and we call that neutrinos, right? So we understood better the neutrinos. We're gonna go a little over time, but we're gonna get to the point of what we do, right? So with neutrinos, we look at these its properties, right? And one of them is because we didn't see them here, right? When we're looking at these decays, we know it's chargeless because these chambers, right? These cloud chambers, they only sensitive to charged particles. But we also, when you calculate the properties, it kind of looked like they didn't have mass, right? So energy conservation was applicable, but they didn't have mass. And to prove that, there was a couple of experiments that were set up. One that proved, if they don't have mass, they should only, so all these fundamental particles, they essentially spin one direction or the other. They don't have mass, they only spin one direction, right? So these experiments prove they only spin one direction. And the other experiment says, if they only spin one direction, then there's this symmetry in nature, that's the left-right symmetry that must be broken, right? And that's what was shown here. So with this in hand, right, that around the 60s, right, 1960s, we essentially, because of this one particle, almost like nature was giving us, so because you have to include this particle in your model, so that's the symmetry you should use, right? And then we did this, and basically, we were able to unify all the physics of these radioactive decays with the electromagnetic physics, right? And we did a bunch of measurements in accelerators during the 80s that proved this was right. The only thing that was missing is, at these energies, right, at these speeds of collision, they are the same theory, but when you go lower, like our energies, then they are different, right? And then to make them different, then you have to create this idea. There's a new particle called the Higgs particle, right? That was then took a little longer to be observed, but was like around the 2012, right? That's the God particle, the source spoken. So they kind of seems fine with this approach, but then in parallel, we sort of started having observations and collecting more and more evidence that the neutrinos actually had masses, which was kind of strange because a lot of these successes of after the 1950s were based off the idea that don't have mass, right? Even like these success experiments, right? And so this is, I put here a picture of what would come to be the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, right? In Sudbury, it was the final proof that neutrinos do have masses, right? And the way they did this was, they built this, so they filled this water, right, and put this underground, like about 2 kilometers underground in Sabra, one of the nickel mines. And they measured neutrinos coming from the sun, right? And then, they kind of proved that the neutrinos coming from the sun, they change types, and then only a fraction of them is measured and observed. This observatory was the only sensitive in the world to all the different possible ways the neutrino can convert. So the total flux of neutrinos observed in the Sudbury observatory was consistent with the solid models. And so they are actually massive, right? So what does that mean? Well, so first, we don't know exactly then what motivated us really took us so far, right? But fine. That actually puts in some new parameters in the model, like the so-called standard model, that can increase that tiny difference between matter and antimatter production, right? So that's basically what drives us doing a more precise detector, right? So because neutrinos, they are very low rate events, right? And you need very precise measurements. So our group is involved with, it's gonna be called the hyper experiment. So it's a very, very large water tank with several photosensors, and then we have a master student that's looking at improving calibrations of this detector, right? So this is in construction. I just wanted to show a timeline of this. So this Hyper-K is the successor of a couple of successful experiments in Kamioka, right? So the first one won the Nobel Prize in 2002 for the first observation of supernova neutrinos, and then its upgrade still running. It's called superconductor, and then it's shared Nobel, like it's associated with shared Nobel Prize between the Sudbury experiment to prove that neutrinos had mass, and now we're building like a bigger one, right, to make more physics, and in particular try to find that asymmetry to be large, right? So they will be working with that. And you can also do physics if you don't look at neutrinos. Right? So there's something, right, that come about when neutrinos have masses, right? Because all particles, they actually spin one direction or the other. Antiparticles, they actually must spin different way of particles. And if they don't have masses, they must spin different. Particles don't have mass, they must spin in different directions. But if they have mass, you can actually make them spin the same. And so you can ask whether, because they have no charge, you can ask whether neutrinos are their antiparticles, if they're like what's so-called Meerna particles. And that would be the only type of particles we know that have these features. Right? So we don't know, right? They could be. So we must test to make sure it is, right? So there must be consequences if they are. And the only one we know how to test is looking at a more specific type of beta decay that's called double beta decay, where a nucleus splits 2 electrons, just like the beta decay, but 2 electrons at the same time along these 2 neutrinos, right? And you can tell this by measuring the speed of the electrons when they come out of the nucleus, right? If neutrinos are present, these energies, they don't add to the energy difference of the nucleus, right? But if neutrinos are antiparticles, if they are Meerna particles, there is a special mode in which only the electrons come out, and that will have a definite energy value. So we're looking for events, right? We're looking for this decay in different nucleids that provide us with double beta decays to see if you can find events with this property, right? I had one more plot just to show where we are about in this search, right? So we are very up here where things could be, but very unlikely, right? So we are based on these measurements from SNO and Super K. We know we have to be either in this blue band or green band in terms of the neutrino masses, but we're still like far up, right? So what we plan for the next 15 years is to reach detectors that are sensitive enough to go down to 10 milli-electron volts in terms of neutrino masses, right? And then eventually, and then I hope still in my lifetime, in 30 years, we can be down here and actually have a final word of whether or not they are Meerna particles, right? So I mean, the impact of such measurements, right, and discovery would be huge, right? So this is an expected new physics, right? So it's expected because we're talking about it, but it's not predicted by the standard models. So that we really have to redefine or redesign how the equations are set, right? And then actually again be a Nobel Prize. So what we do here is we help with physics analysis and development of hardware to be used in detectors that are sensitive for these search, right? So some pictures of this stuff we did in the past, right? So this is before it came. And here's our labs, our PhD student, and some figures of the kind of studies we do towards improving the detectors using these searches, right? So a picture of our lab is in the basement as well, right? So we're I've been here for 2 years, so we finished mounting some of the equipment, right? But we have some analysis going, so consider joining the room. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So yes, quite a few laboratories in the basement, along with the physics club. So that's great. So if you're actually popping down to visit the physics club people and hang out with them, you can also hang out with some of the multiple labs that are in the basement. So that's why you're there. So we will turn over the floor to Professor Rangan now. So this will be our last theory talk of the night. So please, Professor Rangan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chitra Rangan, and I study quantum information and quantum control. The So my students and I are theoretical physicists. And so what this means is that we create models of physical phenomena. We describe these models mathematically, and then we have to solve equations, usually differential equations. And so we either do them by hand, by using pen and paper, so do the mathematics, or we write computer codes and solve these equations numerically. And nowadays, most interesting problems that can be done by hand have already been done. So we do have to use computer code a lot, and you can see the theme of how programming and coding is important in research and all types of research. And then once we get a solution, we relate it to a real world problem, see if it solves the problem, and then we confirm with experiments that have already been done, or we propose experiments that can be done, and then try to talk to experimentalists, researchers, and say, can you do this experiment? And sometimes they can, and sometimes they cannot. So that's sort of the thing that we do. So the theory, students all sit together with the other professors, Dr. Drake and Dr. Rau's students in the theory suite that's in 292. So what if you worked with me, what would you do? First of all, a student who first joins my group, and some of you have actually worked with me before, you learn the tools of quantum research. And so this usually would be, how do atoms, electrons, particles like that, on a very small distance scale, small size scale, how do they behave? And so in order to model that, you'll be solving the Schrodinger equation. And if you haven't learned that, don't worry, you'll see a little bit of it in modern physics in second year, and then you'll learn it in quantum mechanics when you take it in third or fourth year. And then the students will learn how light interacts with matter. And so that means you're solving Maxwell's equations. Again, you'll see that in second year, maybe, and then in third year in E&M, in more detail, like electricity and magnetism. And then at a higher level, you might see how do atoms interact with the environment. And so that you'd be solving Lindblad's equation. So usually, so a lot of equation solving, right? And plotting and that sort of thing. So then once you get the fundamentals, then you'd work on specific problems. For example, what happens when intense light interacts with atoms or clusters of atoms or groups of atoms? So for one example, you have, we all know you have some materials, you shine light on it, light doesn't come out. So we call these materials opaque. So if you have a cluster of atoms and that's opaque to light, you can make it transparent by shining light of a different color that's carefully chosen depending on the quantum system. And then when you shine the light of the second color, the first color goes through. So that's called electromagnetically induced transparency. So that's one example of something that you can study. Another example that you study, and this is in collaboration with Dr. Rau and Dr. Hammond, is how do you shine light of very intense light, but what comes out is light that has many colors. So it's a very short pulse that has lots of colors. And so the process is called high harmonic generation. And I know a couple of you worked with me on that. Another types of things that we can do is in the area of nanoplasmonics, and where you have light interacting with gold, nano gold, and how do you make biosensors with them? So that is one example. So for example, you have a particle of gold that can attach to specific biomolecules. When the molecule attaches, then the color changes, and you model that, and you can use that to build a sensor. So that can detect diseases earlier, or that can detect environmental contaminants in various situations. So those are examples of projects that can happen. So when can you start working with me? You can start somewhere after your first year. You can start working during your second year. You can start somewhere after your second year. You can start doing it good. You get the picture. So I'm usually here on Mondays, Thursdays, and Wednesday afternoons. The other half of the time I'm in Price-Law Hall Tower, because I also work half my time in faculty of grad studies. But you can reach me by email, and there are many ways you can work. So initially, when you start, you probably will start as a volunteer if you're a first-year student, but you could also do a shorter project do an outstanding scholars term or Bayless scholarship. Some people work as a summer research assistant. Once they know a little bit about what I do, then I would hire them as a summer assistant. Or if you could apply for an NSERC USRA, which is a national scholarship that many of our students get, and then they work with professors in that. You could also take the undergraduate research course, which is a course that you can just take for credit. So it's you can do your research and get credit for that. You can also do an undergraduate thesis. So but you can decide on undergraduate thesis in your third year. You don't need to do it right away. So there are many different ways to work. Sometimes I've also had students work with me on Ignite work study programs. So there are different ways you can actually work with me, and I hope some of you are interested in working with me. So I'll look forward to getting your email or seeing you. Thanks.
Okay, so we have one last talk left. I think it's me. Great. Oh, that's okay. Go back. That's right. I got it. All right. So thanks, everybody. So I'm Steve Rehse. I'm going to talk about the biomedical spectroscopy experiments that we do up in my lab. So it's kind of like Dr. Hammond's lab. We use intense pulses of laser light. Our pulses are actually nanosecond in duration, as opposed to Dr. Hammond's that are femtosecond. And we're doing this actually as a tool. This laser is intense enough where when we focus it into a target, it actually vaporizes or it melts. It causes it to turn into a gaseous cloud. And this creates a very hot plasma glowing cloud of atoms and ions. And what we do then is we perform optical spectroscopy on that. We collect all the light, we break it up into its constituent colors. That's what spectroscopy is. And when you do that, you can actually measure some things about it. So I have a little video of this playing in the upper corner. This is what it sounds like in my lab. A lot. So what you're seeing here is you can't see the laser, it's invisible, but you're seeing this flashing light. It's quite bright. That's a laser, let's call that a laser-induced plasma. And you can do spectroscopy on it. All right, and so everything that we're doing is kind of a very interesting mix of laser physics. It's definitely laser physics. Dr. Hammond and I are the kind of laser people. It's definitely optics. It's atomic physics because we study the atomic physics of what's happening in this plume. It's plasma physics because this is a hot plasma, which is its own kind of blend of physics. It's definitely spectroscopy, which is breaking light into colors. I actually consider myself a spectroscopist. That's if you kind of had to pin me what kind of physicist I am. That's what I do. And definitely it's also an interesting mix of machine learning because we actually are now very much so into machine learning to analyze these patterns of colors such that we can identify what's going on in there. So this is what my lab looks like. Here are three of my former students, Carolyn, Hadia, and Jasmine, looking very, very snazzy in their very safe laser safety goggles. So it's kind of very optically intense. So these are all lasers and optics. So all my students get very, very good hands-on experience operating the equipment through our tool chest, building things, doing spectroscopy, setting up optical components, working with the lasers, very, very kind of marketable skills in the 21st century. So that's really interesting. But what are we trying to do with this particular technique? Right now, I'm kind of very fixated on trying to rapidly detect and identify bacterial cells in specimens of blood, urine, or cerebral spinal fluid. So we collaborate with the Windsor Regional Hospital. We're getting clinical specimens from them. We are growing our own bacteria. So this is kind of our idea, which is you're getting blood from a blood draw or urine from a urine sample, or this is CSF from a spinal tap, which we're not actually getting right now because Windsor doesn't do enough of those. But these are clinically obtained specimens. We grow our own bacteria. So I'm working with a lot of biomedical and biological science type people. And we mount these specimens of bacteria and fluid on a special little insert that one of my students designed, and we 3D print. We call it shooting the sample. So here you can see this is the light coming off a sample, and this is what a sample of bacteria looks like after you shot it, little ablation craters. We get something called a spectrum. It looks kind of like this. All of the data that we get out of our experiments looks something like this. And then it's kind of what do you do with it? And so we spend a lot of time on the biological side trying to figure out this step. We spend a lot of time on the laser side trying to get this, and we spend a lot of time on the computer side trying to figure out how does this pattern tell me that it's this type of bacteria and not this type of bacteria. And machines are very, very good at that, and the human eye is not very good at that. And then what we do is we just iterate. We kind of go around and around. It's very, very experimental because we're trying to invent a technique, and it's just a kind of a constant cycle of self-improvement. But self-improvements on the hardware side, on the computer side, on the analytics side, on the spectroscopist side. It's kind of all of that. So this is kind of what my group looks like. So as of like right now, I have, these are actually all biomedical sciences people. So I have 4 or 5 of them working in my lab, and then like 4 or 5 physics majors at any one time. So the physics majors kind of handle all the laser stuff. They are welcome to do the bacteria stuff as well as they want, but the bio people really want to get into that because that's the kind of experience that they're wanting to do. So when they go forward. So this is my group in 2023, 2024. It's actually all undergraduates in both of these pictures. So large opportunities for undergraduate researchers in my lab. No problem with that. If you want to know more about what we do, I would say just check us out on YouTube. So you just go to YouTube and look for a tour of the Rehse Biomedical Physics Lab at the University of Windsor. This is my former student, Sydney. She's a lawyer now, if you can believe it. If shooting lasers at bacteria is proper preparation for a career in law, I guess it is, because she is a lawyer now. So there you go. So here's Cindy indicating that when you see that you can come see me, please, anytime except for when the danger light is on the lab, that you can't come see me because it's dangerous inside. So don't come see me then. Okay. Any the rest of the time, just come find me. I'm right across the hall, or send me an email. So that's it. Thank you.
Always win, if they're afraid you might shoot them with a laser or something.
Yes. Okay. So that is it for the faculty members who are talking. So Sareen, why don't you go ahead and stand up and introduce your.
Sam, Meerna, who else? Matt. Just, I guess for the video, so we have to come to the way front. Oh, and Abdullah and Lauren, sorry. I just read. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Is it all right just to have this in background then? You just turn it on. Unless they're sliding. I don't think they have.
No slides. Yes. Well, hello guys. So here are us. We're representative of each of a student group. So we have Lauren and Abdullah there in Dr. Rehse's lab. Matt is in Dr. Licciardi's lab. Nick is an example of someone who was in Dr. Rehse's lab, in Dr. Rau's lab, Dr. Rangan's lab, and he did co-op.
Okay.
And then there's Sam, she's in Dr. Zhao's lab, and she also did a summer internship. And then Meerna and Dr. Hammond, and I am in theory with Dr. Rau. So I guess we'll go around, we'll essentially say how this experience has been very valuable to us. And then if you guys have questions, you are able to ask us. Just get a little.
Starting. I guess the biggest thing with doing a research project is that your problems aren't like supposed to be finished by the end of the day, right? I mean, we've been working on problems that have been taking us the whole semester and much longer than that. So you have to think about it very deeply and a big thing is performing these experiments very carefully. There's no really getting a 9 out of 10 is not really applicable in this work. And another thing that at least I find my research really interesting is all this interdisciplinary thinking. So Dr. Rehse had this one flow chart, but I think a more accurate version would have arrows pointing every box together because every single step relates to every other step, and it becomes a little bit of a headache. But it is just interesting to think about. So yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also in Dr. Rehse's lab, and it is a really cool part just that it's so interdisciplinary. So we're working with a lot of bio students, computer science students at times as well. So you end up learning a lot about different fields and not solely physics as well. So there's a lot of applied work that we do. Additionally, just working as a group and collaborating and kind of like thinking out loud, always trying to come up with the next idea to better improve the project is always really exciting. And also we tend to learn a lot of concepts that aren't yet introduced in classes. So we tend to have a bit of like a preview, I guess, of what's to come and kind of to get excited for that as well.
Yeah, so I work with Dr. Licciardi, experimental physics, and I'm primarily focused with the data analysis. So I'll get some data and I'll try to process it to make something out of it. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for hands-on work in an experimental setup, but there's also work for some data analysis, right? And trying to make sense of the data.
I'm not with anyone right now anymore just because I'm focusing on finishing the computer science part of my degree. But I was initially when I went with Dr. Rehse, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with physics, but then it was just kind of an easy way to say I got in there and I liked coding, so I started doing that more. And then I came with Dr. Rau and Rangan to do even more coding in physics, and that's how I kind of just discovered that that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. And it's an easy way for you to stand out among everyone else because everyone's taking the same stuff you are. But this way you can tell people, okay, well, I actually applied what I learned in a specific area that's important. So that's what I got out of that.
So I work with Dr. Xiao in the MRI lab, and I do a lot of hands-on building, but I also work with simulations and things like that. And I started in my second year, and now I'm in my third year, and I'm still working with Dr. Xiao. And I think it's a great experience to get involved, and you learn a lot of skills that you don't learn in the classroom, and you learn how to collaborate with everyone else who's working in the lab. And you learn like unique skills that kind of set you apart from everyone else. Like I learned how to 3D print and 3D model, and you don't learn that in a typical class. And then I also got an internship last summer at the hospital, and I worked right with the medical physicists there at Windsor Regional. And I think that was a great experience. They don't offer it every year, but when they do, I would recommend it to anyone. And I did that last summer, right after second year. And you get to work and see how medical physicists work in their day-to-day lives, and you get a specific project that no one else is working on. Like it'll be different the next summer if they have it again. So it's a good opportunity, and it's good to see the actual medical physicist in action, to see if you want to do that with your life or just to see it in person. Because it's kind of at least I didn't really know what a medical physicist did until I had that experience. So I thought it was good.
Yeah, so I work with Dr. Hammond's lab. And so like when I first started, I started working on like these, like a pendulum. And so I was building something for like a demonstration in classes, but then I started working on the AFM. So I learned to like work with delicate equipment. And the majority of my project in the summer with the USRA was just programming and like learning how to like analyze the data that I get from the atomic force microscope and how to combine like different scans, 3D scans and removing overlap. So I learned a lot of programming. I learned how to work with like delicate machines, and yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, I work with Dr. Rau, and to me,
my camera.
Okay. To me, I think the greatest thing about research was kind of learning how to self-improve. So I remember when I first started, I don't know anything, and I still don't know anything. And all I knew was differential equations, and Dr. Rau was so nice to be like, great, let's go with that. So we started with that. And then from there, I was in a computer science class, but I didn't know how to program that well. And then working with Dr. Rau, I learned the problems I usually would ignore and be like, yeah, this works out. They're not really that good. I should actually try and improve and make it better. But the most important thing about research is kind of like how things work and why we do certain things and what better ways to adapt and solve a problem. I think that's what you can get out, because sometimes in class you might not see that. You'll get a problem, it'll be pretty standard, and then you'll just keep on kind of reiterating that technique or reiterating that algorithm. With research, you kind of have to, okay, this didn't work. What's our next line of approach? This didn't work either. What can we do instead? Right? But I think the other thing is you kind of learn what you really enjoy outside of a classroom, right? So I knew I liked electromagnetism. I think standard electromagnetism we don't really do with Dr. Rau. Like I like Maxwell's equations, but now I like magnetism in a different way. And I like math, so I've been able to interact with it in a different way. So what's nice is once you find something that you're passionate about, so don't just do research to differentiate you from someone else, also do it because you actually have passion in it, because that will make you better, right? So that's why I like doing research, and it's been a great experience.
So,
Can I just ask one thing? Matt, you had some experience doing some research on linguistics, right? You have a paper on that.
Oh, yeah, that's
Can you
true.
just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so,
Different field.
yeah, so that's when I was in my second year working with Dr. Rangan. And over the summer, I had the chance to work with I believe it was a psychology graduate student. And I was taught to code the kind of linguistic models and how words relate with other words in these large corpuses of text. And basically that was used to train like a model, kind of like an AI would, right? They relate words with other words and have like an associate level of compatibility between those words. So I got the chance to do that over the summer, which was nice.
I was just going to ask, so for people who are not in a group yet, you might be like waiting until you think you know enough where you can start making contributions in a lab. So maybe we'll just ask everybody, like, how much did you know about what you're going to be doing when you came into the lab? So maybe just start very quickly go on.
Yeah, more or less zero.
I wasn't know very much. I joined in my first year, first semester, because I thought it was something really interesting. And I always liked the idea of combining like the medical field and physics. So I've learned a ton though.
So same here, I didn't really know much. Started in different research groups, jumped around here and there. But over the years, learned a bunch.
Nothing.
Yeah, I didn't really know anything coming into finance.
Yeah, like nothing at all, especially like with programming. I was not good at all, but then I kind of got a lot better during that summer. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, no, nothing.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. The students learn stuff that isn't in coursework and isn't in the textbooks that you read. It opens your horizons to in a way that you otherwise wouldn't happen.
But the point is you don't need to wait until you learn about it in a class to do it. So I think you heard the theme, like that nobody knows anything, and that's fine. So if you're worried about that, that's absolutely what we expect. Like if we just don't ever have students who come ready to do those things. And that's moreover, not only do you not know it, but you are going to maybe get it ahead of your classmates though. So that's an advantage, right? I think Lauren said that you're going to get these things before you get them in class. So don't wait on that, and don't feel afraid that you don't know anything, you can't make a contribution. You heard Sareen say, like, what do you know? What do you want to do? They'll find something for you. They really will. We spend a lot of time thinking about if a new first year student came or a second year student, what would we do, right? What can we find some project for you? Every one of us, we talk all the time. There's something we can get you to do. And that's just start. You got to just get started somewhere. And then the other thing is, like, sometimes what happens when people quote unquote choose wrong. So Nick, any consequences of working for 2 or 3 different groups? Did I ever come hunt you down after you?
The first time, like when I came to you directly, I didn't even know what was going on. You know, I just thought, like, I just knew Dr. Rehse, and I was like, okay, I need lab experience to do that. And I came and I was like, okay, they shoot lasers, push a lot of stuff, which is cool, but like it just wasn't that interesting to me. So I went right to the coding part of it, which was the machine learning that he was talking about. And so just spending time on that, just kind of, again, made me realize what I did and didn't want to do. So choosing wrong isn't, it's not a bad thing. It's okay. It's just it's another thing you can cross off the list for what you don't want to do.
So meaning no one will hold it against you if you choose a group and you're like, oh, this wasn't for me, but now I really want to work with Dr. Drake or like, that's fine. Absolutely fine. Because I know sometimes students do worry about that. They just get a little bit reluctant. It's like, oh, I don't want to even like tell the person I'm not with you anymore. It's like, it's fine. It's all fine. That's completely what we're here for. So you can't choose wrong. Don't worry about it. Pick something and maybe then, like Nick said, then you'll learn what you don't like. That's important for sure. So any other questions for these guys? Somebody must have. Let's take one question from a student, at least one. There must be one. There must be some. Sareen has a question.
Yeah, so the question is for Matt. You said you program, right? What do you program with? We only learn C, right?
Yeah.
How did you learn Python?
I just learned it along the way. That's pretty much what it is. I mean, it can start in the class, right? You get some homework problems, start with coding. But over the years, you kind of just get projects here and there that require coding. So you just pick it up along the way. There's not really kind of sit down and just learn it. It's kind of just learn as you go.
I have another question. Sam, so you're in third year, you have a lot of work. How do you make time to do research? Or how do you deal with time management? Is it scary?
It's definitely hard, but I think you just have to set a schedule for yourself and stick to it.
But it's not scary.
Yeah, it's not scary. Like we were both in third year, we had a busy year, but we still are in the lab and back time.
Anyone else? Any last thoughts? Any last thoughts from you guys? Anything you wanted to say, or it's pretty good?
Do research.
Okay. Right. So we'll thank the students then very much for this. And that's great. So now you all kind of know what we're doing, and we hope to see you. And make sure once Dr. Rau and I get done processing the video, we're going to post this on YouTube. So make sure if you guys know people who weren't able to come tonight, tell them to just wait a little bit. They can find out what all the fact they're doing. If they don't want to like look us up on the web or come talk to us, they could start there. That might take a little while, but please do come talk to us. And again, if people are interested in the Bayless, please do start reaching out to advisors and get your applications in, because we want to give that scholarship away to somebody. All right, so thanks a lot, everybody, and have a good night. And please fill up on some food before you leave. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Great attention.
That's a great event. Really good time.
If it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, Sareen did kind of. Thanks for showing up and talking.